This has to be one of the craziest stories around a baseball player, and a baseball player that's had quite the interesting run with a team, and that's with Yoenis Cespedes. I mean, this whole thing on Sunday was absolutely crazy. I mean, you couldn't script what had happened. I mean, you couldn't really have scripted this entire Mets run, but it came to an end. I mean, I cannot think of a player ever doing this, especially in recent memory. But to give you a little backstory, so the Mets played in Atlanta late on Saturday night. They had a 1 o'clock game on Sunday against the Braves. And we found out in the first inning that Yoenis Cespedes not only didn't show up to the ballpark, but the Mets were unsure of his whereabouts. No one could get into contact with him. They were looking for him, and that's a pretty scary moment because all of a sudden you're concerned about the well-being of a person because you don't know what's happened. Were they involved in an accident? Could something terrible have happened? And especially in a day and age where we're in a pandemic, where a lot's going on, you were scared for Yoenis Cespedes. But then you hear the end of the story, and I believe a lot of Met fans are angry, not with the decision, but how the decision was handled. There's a certain way you have to handle business. Look, if you want to opt out because you are concerned about the coronavirus, I have absolutely no problem with that. You have every right to opt out. It's your health. It's your decision. But the way Yoenis Cespedes handled this was as poorly handled as I could possibly imagine. If you had come to the Mets Sunday morning and say, look, over this last week, more information's come out. We've seen cases spike in the Major League Baseball. I'm not comfortable. I'm opting out. Okay, I think Met fans would be disappointed, but it would be understood. It comes after you've been struggling at the plate. You're hitting under 200 this season. And one of the most telling things was in the post-game conference where Brody Van Wagenen was explaining to the media what exactly had happened. One of the little tidbits he let slip was that this past week they'd been discussing with Cespedes, and Cespedes was concerned he wasn't going to reach the benchmarks of his contract. And for those of you who don't know, he reduced his contract this year, but he put a lot of provisions in it, and of course it's prorated, so X amount of at-bats, X amount of games, and he was concerned that he wasn't going to get to those numbers, despite the Mets basically playing him as the DH this entire season despite his struggles. And in some ways, this is, I think, a good thing for the Mets because I want to see Dominic Smith get more at-bats. He's been more productive at the plate than Cespedes. I feel Cespedes was not the same player he was. But, man, just the way he handled it. He didn't tell anyone. He had his agent contact the Mets halfway through the game to basically say, oh, yeah, he's opting out of the season. There's a way you have to handle business, and the way it comes off to me is sour grapes. He was frustrated, maybe with his play, maybe because he felt he was going to get a reduced role because of the way he's been playing, but also screamed to me that he was frustrated with the way the season's been going. And I get this last week has been excruciating as Met fans. It has been hard. I can't imagine what it's doing to the players. But you make the decision and you leave your teammates out there. You leave your teammates out there hanging. And look, they would understand if this was truly about your health. I get that. But you have to handle it the right way. There's always a right and a wrong way to handle it. And this is the wrong way to handle it. This is like breaking up via a text message. This is like if you were invited to a wedding. Like let's say you had a partner and you were invited to a very prestigious wedding with them, and you had basically given no inclination that you were out of the relationship, that you were still together, and then on the day of the wedding, not only do you not show up at all, but halfway through, you have a friend text your girlfriend, your boyfriend, whatever, and say, oh, by the way, I want out. That's how it comes off to me. And I understand that this has been a difficult time for a lot of baseball players because the coronavirus, we've seen the spikes, we've seen the impact on the Marlins, we've heard them call out the protocols in Major League Baseball. I have no issue with Yoenis Cespedes opting out. I have zero. The issue I have was how you do it. You have to handle it. And really, for Mets fans, this has been a sour experience with Cespedes. And it's been quite the roller coaster. And I will go back to the day they gave him that 4-year extension. I have no problem with that contract. I know in retrospect it wasn't a good one, but at the time you gave the Mets credit for doing the right move, getting a player that helped them. But this all goes back to me, last offseason, where all of a sudden you got that report that he had re-injured his heel by falling in a hole. And then it was he fell off a horse. And it was, for Met fans, it was, this doesn't make any sense. And then it finally came out after months that, oh yeah, it was a wild boar on his ranch. But that's the problem. Cespedes has not been straightforward. So when this happens, you're not going to believe him. To me, Met fans can rightfully so be mad at Yoenis Cespedes because it feels like this was a cop-out. And that's unfortunate because he could be doing this for all the right reasons, but the way he has handled it and the optics of the way he has handled it, it opens himself up to all the criticism, and it's well-deserved. But I will say this, because this is likely the end of his Mets career. For what the Mets got out of him, getting to the World Series, those 2 great first years from Yoenis Cespedes, the Mets still made out great from this trade. Now, the contract over the last couple of years, it's been frustrating that he hasn't been able to play. But for what the Mets gave up to get Yoenis Cespedes, that trade was worth it. It helped them get to a World Series. And it's such a weird history with a player because there's so many great highs with Yoenis Cespedes, but there's also so many lows and so many weird stories. I mean, these aren't just stories. These are just stories. Like, if you gave these to fiction writers in Hollywood, they couldn't come up with this stuff. This is just ridiculous. So this is the end of Yoenis Cespedes' career, likely with the Mets. The only thing is, I'm not sure if the contract will get bumped to next year, but I have a feeling the Mets are going to fight it and just get out of this contract. But I'll say this, I actually think it's a blessing in disguise because Cespedes hasn't been playing well this year. I want to see Dominic Smith get more at-bats. I think Andres Jimenez has played very well, and I would like to see him getting more at-bats. You can move Robbie Cano to the DH role. I think this is actually a good thing for the Mets because I don't think Cespedes was helping them on the field. But it's just frustrating because it just is that same old Mets. It's that same old Mets kind of thing. Like, only this kind of thing could happen to the Mets, and that's why it's frustrating as a fan. Because all you hear is you versed your concern for this player because you think something bad could have happened to him or something could be seriously wrong, and then you find out, oh, no, he basically just decided, I'm done. I'm just going to take my stuff and leave and not tell anyone. So, I mean, if you're upset with Yoenis Cespedes as a Met fan, you have every right to be. And it's unfortunate because he can be doing this for the right things. But in life, you can be making the right decision. But just because you're making the right decision, there's a way you have to do it. There's a way to do everything correctly and make sure that every part and every step that you are taking is the correct way to handle the situation. And in this one, Yoenis Cespedes did absolutely everything wrong. That's going to do it for this episode of Rich Sports Talk. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the latest content. A lot of great stuff, especially with the NFL around the corner. Make sure you're here so you don't miss any of it. Until next time, I'm Nolan Rich, and this is Rich Sports Talk.